Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Um, well, this session, um, Beyond the Pandemic, what we've learned about virtual exchange programs was really motivated by learning from what has happened in the last year and how programs have um, improved and what are the intentions moving forward. So I want to invite the panelists to join me on camera and introduce themselves. Um, Share your name, organization, role, and maybe where you're joining us from today. I'm joining from New York, and let's have Michelle. Why don't you start?
Good morning. My name is Michelle Sawa. I work for the organization American Councils for International Education, and I work as the Disability Component Coordinator for secondary schools programs, specifically the Flex and Yes programs. And I am joining from Washington, D.C.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Molly, then Tim and Caleb.
Thank you. I'm Molly Stern, and I work with AFS Intercultural Programs, which is based in New York City, but I am here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'll share more about what I work on, but my job title is Education Innovation Manager.
Hey folks, I'm Tim Fuchs, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm a white man, about 40 years old. I have dark sandy hair, and I'm sitting in actually my dad's office. I'm calling in from Virginia Beach while I'm visiting family, so credit to him for letting me crash his office while I'm here, but I live and work in Washington, D.C. And I'm wearing a blue button-up shirt, which is quite dressed up for me these days. In casual COVID times. I am the operations director at the National Council on Independent Living, which, if you're not familiar, is a national disability rights organization run by and for people with disabilities. And in that role, I run most of our programs, special events, including our conferences and trainings, which I think is why I've been invited to talk today. We've gotten a lot of experience from that, and really happy to be with you all and share some of what we've learned. Thanks.
And howdy, everyone. My name is Caleb Chapman. I am from the Education Abroad Office at Texas A&M University. I'm joining from home in College Station, Texas, where we're kind of coming off, if you're following the Olympics, we're celebrating Team Mo's gold medal win in track yesterday. So we're really excited about that, but I'm happy to join. Yeah, so good morning.
Well, thank you everyone for those nice introductions. I'm gonna ask my colleagues to reshare the slides and Caleb to remain on camera to start off sharing some program details.
Great, thank you. In my role in Education Abroad, I work, my official title is Communications Coordinator. And so I come to this kind of from a lens, kind of an outreach lens of helping, students define programs and raise awareness, and recruit for programs and that type of thing. And so as, at A&M, as one of the largest study abroad operations in the nation, we have had a lot of folks asking us, reaching out, just wanting to know kind of what we've done and how we've adjusted during the pandemic. And really the biggest thing is we've rethinking our contact or connection with students. And so when I say virtual advising, what I mean is kind of all the touch points that we may have with students. That include our advising appointments, our pre-departure orientations, informational sessions, and the like. And so virtual advising is really nothing. It's nothing exciting or flashy, but it is something that we found to be very important when thinking about access and accessibility to our programs and services. And so while we've had the capability to perform advising virtually for quite some time, it really has taken the pandemic to truly move to that format. It gave us the push that we needed to move in that direction, you know, and it also ensured that the university had the bandwidth and the capability necessary to pull it off. Really, in the end, we like it. And so, you know, we're going to do everything we can to resist that urge to kind of go back to normal in the fall when our students return in person. And if we can go to the next slide. One more, sorry, I skipped over. So by developing virtual spaces, we have really shifted from that mindset of, you know, students have to come to us, they have to find us to get the information that we want to provide or to, you know, to utilize our services or resources. And we've shifted to the, you know, we will meet them where they are philosophy. And so we're really moving forward in all of our, whether it's advising practices or programming or events that we're holding, we're really using that philosophy to its fullest. And so in the fall, you know, virtual appointments for us, especially with advising, are going to continue to be our primary method for talking to and reaching students. Pre-departure orientations will be, we've almost finished building out those modules, learning modules, and so those will all be fully accessible and online to all of the students who are going abroad. And then our once in-person kind of informational sessions, whether that's a broad one-on-one session, whether we're talking about funding, whether we're doing a specific presentation on a broad program, all of those will be available on demand as well, 24/7 for our students. We're also thinking through different ideas as far as, you know, what we're doing with the you know, the traditional dreaded fall fair. And so looking at how we approach that in a much different way that, again, meets students where they are and creates a higher level of accessibility. And next slide, please. And so I just kind of wanted to provide a few bullet points on kind of, you know, why we're refusing to revert to the way things were in regards to virtual spaces. One is it's provided us with an ability to really collect information from students prior to meeting with them. And so that equates to a more meaningful and personal conversation with them. It also provides a much more comfortable, a much more private setting to have those conversations, especially when a student may be coming in with, you know, specific identity questions that they may not be comfortable with speaking with in front of a group of people. It limits physical barriers that may exist in regards to attending an in-person appointment or event or session. If, you know, these on-demand modules are also going to allow students to go at their own pace in their own environment, which creates a level of comfort. And then it also is going to provide greater access, you know, due to limitations that may be created by the space, time, location, etc. You know, looking at whether it's a disability or whether, you know, we're thinking about a single mother or, you know, whatever that looks like, what we're thinking through all of those barriers that could exist and how virtual spaces can help us move past those. And so that's kind of just a quick rundown based on kind of what we're doing in regards to how we're getting students to these programs and helping them find those programs and really utilizing, hopefully utilizing the virtual spaces effectively in order to do that.
So, like I said, I'm Molly Stern, and I will talk a little bit about our Global Up programs with AFS. But I really enjoyed hearing, Caleb, why your school is continuing to do virtual advising. That is so exciting. So thanks for sharing your portion. So AFS, you may know as a flagship program for high school exchange programs, but in the last 7 years has actually been also working with 18 plus programming in all types of virtual or all types of exchange programs. In about 2015, launched something called the Global Competence Certificate Program, which is an online curriculum that complemented study abroad programs, both with AFS and with other providers. So you can go to the next slide, please. So a couple virtual programs that I just wanted to highlight today. We have Global Up programs, our Global Competence Special Edition, and the Global U Adventure. So let me start with our Global Up programs. There are 4 different versions now of this curriculum, which really is focused on building intercultural competence for learners 14 and older. So the first one, Global Up Abroad, supports any program that is going on a study abroad program with online modules and facilitated dialogue sessions. About a year before the pandemic came, we started working on our Global Up at Home program. And the whole idea around this was creating more access to intercultural learning and growing intercultural competence for those who cannot study abroad, whether they be, professionals or students. Just knowing that there are barriers to those people who cannot study abroad for whatever reason, but still wanting to grow global or intercultural competence. Off of the Global Up at Home, we decided to create a program that was specifically for those seeking professional development, and used our Global Up at Home as our base for that, but then put in workplace scenarios so that people could be thinking and reflecting on, how they show up at work, how they can be a better team member when working with diverse teams. And now we also have Global Up Teen. And so again, just another version of our Global Up at Home for a younger audience. Next slide. On the screen, I have a picture of a road where a car is driving past 4 educational goals that I'll go over here. So first, our Global Up programs, the online modules are housed on a learning management system called Bridge. And this learning management system fit with our needs of being ADA compliant. So if you need to use like a screen reader, it has the ability to, put our content into dark mode so that that is more easily managed. All of our videos are captioned in multiple languages as well. And the learning is both synchronous and asynchronous. And so we wanted to allow for some self-paced approach to this. So we have facilitated dialogue sessions that take place throughout each journey of our Global Up programs, but you can return to those modules if you want to revisit, a topic like how do you approach conflict or stereotypes and generalizations. So really the 4 goals that we have for all of our Global Up programs is to first increase your self-awareness, second, deepen your awareness of others, third, being able to manage your emotional response in a context that is new or disorienting to you. And then 4, finally, being able to bridge across differences. Anyone who goes through our programs receives a certificate at the end saying, I have a global competence certificate. Go to the next slide, please. So this slide is meant to just capture what does our program look like. So on the screen, I first have a picture of one of the animated videos, and it shows that we can have captions in multiple languages. I have another screenshot of our animated characters. They are diverse in nature, and this screenshot shows one of the modules where we're teaching how to become an active listener and to show empathy. And so it also shows one of our prompts, which has a space at the bottom for students to comment in the forum and hear what others around the world have been sharing about how many types of listeners have they experienced that are like this? What types of listening habits do you mostly fall into? So just reflecting on you as a listener and others as listeners. And that's just one example of what the modules look like. And then you can also see the abilities of different languages and different access points for Bridge as a platform. Next slide, please. Just a snapshot of who is using our programs. So like I said, both our Global Up at Home and Global Up Abroad have been used with higher ed institutions and technical colleges and other nonprofits, both for study abroad programs, professional development, or now teacher education programs as well. Can you go to the next slide, please? Another program that we launched during the pandemic is called the Global Competence Special Edition. So we took our global programs and made them into a more youth-friendly audience. And so we had at AFS 7,000 students who had to end their study abroad program early, which meant they all were traveling home. Some of them had their program canceled, 2 weeks into their program. And so there was this idea, oh my gosh, we have this program that we've developed for 18 and older. Why don't we quickly, go through it, morph it into 14 to 17-year-old audience, and allow for those learners to have interactions online. And it made a huge difference in how they were feeling about their program being canceled, how they felt about AFS as an organization, and also just how they were dealing with the pandemic. So I have on the screen, by the numbers, there was 60,000 interactions on our forums between March and May. There was 650 live sessions that we quickly coordinated within AFS with facilitators. And then 53 countries were participating in the Global Competence Special Edition. Here are some quotes from the forum. As students were reflecting, one student said, "I think I am in the learning zone right now as I'm still taking in the sudden changes in environment after having returned to India. I'm readjusting to my old life in a gradual manner while trying to embed the values that I learned during my exchange program in my life back home too." And then another student responded to that comment and said, "I understand. I also tried to integrate the new values I got into my experience back home too." And finally, a second student said, "Literally same." So just showing, how the youth were interacting during their canceled, sheltered in place, or returned early programs, and why this really helped us support them. You can go to the next slide. Because that was so successful with those who had their program changes, we developed another version of this called the Global U Adventurer program. So this is our virtual only exchange program where now anybody from around the world, 14 to 17 years old, can enroll in a cohort that is a worldwide cohort. So the learners are now meeting in the forums and in the live sessions that we're coordinating through AFS. It allows for connection in a time where students and facilitators are feeling isolated. It can be really meaningful to have those who are reflecting on intercultural, concepts and theories, just to connect in every other week for over 8 weeks. And then there's intercultural competence, and we're also finding we're developing some courageous learners as well in these conversations. So I've been lucky to facilitate some of these cohorts. And what I've been hearing is that students who didn't think that they would ever go abroad are finding confidence after going through a virtual program that they now are interested in studying abroad. They loved interacting with the world in the Global U Adventure program in a virtual space, didn't have to leave their home, but now they want more. So that's very exciting. Can go to the next slide.
Molly, this is Monica. Could you describe the image on the right?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, thank you. There is an image of two women looking at a phone, smiling, and the idea here is that they're, watching some of our animated videos or reading some of the comments in the forums, and it has blue text over that says Global U Adventure #AFS Effect.
Thank you.
Thank you. So finally, I just wanted to also say, yeah, AFS virtual programming here to stay. For us, the answer is yes. Right now, one of our biggest partners is Education New Zealand, who knows that their borders will be closed for at least the next year. And with that, have developed several really wonderful virtual exchange programs for both students and teachers. So teachers are going to be exchanging between different countries. I think we have India and Thailand and New Zealand all participating together, as well as students being able to find buddies across the world and reflect on these intercultural concepts together. We're also wondering, is this virtual programming, again, giving students who might not otherwise have considered a study abroad program just some more confidence in having this, experience from their computer first? So we're thinking about that. And then possibilities for hybrid approaches. I know a lot of universities that are using the Global Up programs have used the Global Up at Home as a place to hold students who wanted to study abroad last year, being able to, get them kind of ready and wrap their minds around how it might be useful to do some intercultural competence building before they go abroad. And then, using this, the Global Up Abroad after, while they're on their program. And next up, we're thinking about supporting teachers around the world with a Global Up educator, and also maybe some professional cohorts. There's an image on the slide of a Black woman wearing a coral shirt, smiling at the camera, with students who are smiling at their computers behind her. So we're thinking about, is this something that maybe international educators want to be building their own intercultural competence as part of professional development, or as, personal interest as well? And I think that brings me to the end of my session.
Thank you, Molly. If we could stop the slides now. And I want to invite Michelle to talk about her programs.
Thank you, Johelini. So I'm Michelle Sawa. I work at American Councils on the Flex and Yes programs, which are high school exchange programs for students from other countries to come to the US for 1 year. They live with host families and study in high school. And these programs have been around for almost 30 and almost 20 years, and they've always worked to recruit students with disabilities in all in-person activities. And then with this pivot to virtual space that we've seen in the last year and a half, we had the opportunity to include students and alumni with disabilities in the virtual space. And we did this using something called the twin track approach, which is something we learned from MyUSA. So thank you, MyUSA. And the twin track approach is the idea that you have your track one, which is people with disabilities should be included in everything. So one example of that is every year after our students return home, we have something called a re-entry workshop for those students in their countries to talk about reverse culture shock, adjusting to life back home. And the workshop also serves as an introduction to alumni programming and activities, and what opportunities and grants are available to them as alumni of the program and of the US government, and of a US government scholarship. And there's usually a community service component for that. So we have that workshop in every country where we have alumni every year, and we include alumni with disabilities in this workshop. They receive accommodations so that they can have full access to the workshop. So that's track one, where you include people with disabilities in all of your programming. And then track two is the idea that there is value in holding some programs for specifically for people with disabilities. And it's also important to be clear on what is that value, why are we doing this? So this year, because everything was in the virtual setting, we were able to have an additional reentry workshop for alumni with disabilities, where they had their own space as students with disabilities to talk about their own experiences on program, their own challenges and joys of returning home, and their goals for the future. So these alumni came from, I think, 20 different countries, and they were able to gather together for 2 sessions and talk together and connect and discuss topics that were relevant to them as people with disabilities. So we decided there was value in that and giving them a space to talk with each other. And this was something we hadn't been able to do before because the reentry workshops were always in person in a specific country. So that was a nice opportunity to employ the twin track approach. And then later last fall, we had a workshop called Projects for All, which was a workshop about creating and carrying out small grant projects, which is something that we do often for our alumni who return home, because small grants are a big component of alumni programming, community service. It's a good way to get the alumni involved, and we have grants available from State Department for these alumni who want to create projects. And so this year, the theme was designing inclusive and empowering projects. And we made sure to add the word empowering because we didn't just want projects that included people with disabilities as volunteers or just focused on the disability community and doing something useful in that community. We wanted to communicate to the students who are participating in this workshop that if you have a project that's focused on working in the disability community, or you want to involve volunteers with disabilities, as you should, it's crucial to have people with disabilities in leadership and planning positions during the design of that project. So you don't just want a project that helps the disability community if you haven't asked and involved people with disabilities what they want in the creation of that project. So we used this workshop to emphasize to all of our alumni that they should include a person or persons with disabilities from the start and design of their project. So this workshop was open to all alumni, and we made a big push to invite alumni with disabilities to the workshop. So we did the same things we would do for any workshop. We posted announcements on social media. We made sure to note that accommodations would be provided. And then we also sent targeted emails and messages to our alumni with disabilities with specific invitations to join in. And this really did boost the attendance of alumni with disabilities in the workshop, which in turn boosted the number of alumni with disabilities who applied for grants, which was the goal. And then the last activity that I want to talk about happened in summer of 2021. We just finished last weekend. And we held a mentoring program for alumni with disabilities. It was a 3-month mentoring program. It was modeled after other mentoring programs that we've done in specific countries. We've done them in Russia and I believe Armenia and a few other countries. And we've had alumni with disabilities participate in those programs as well. So that example of doing it in a specific country for all alumni and including alumni with disabilities would be an example of track 1. And then since we were doing this virtually, we realized that we could bring the alumni with disabilities together to have the opportunity to mentor and learn from each other. So that was track 2. So we gathered the application for alumni with disabilities and grouped them together. We paired older alumni and newer alumni together based on interests and goals, which they listed in their applications. And then we asked them to meet in pairs throughout the summer. They came up with their own plan of action of what they wanted to talk about in their mentoring pairs. And then we also offered several professional development opportunities to all of the alumni in the program on public speaking, mental health, emotional intelligence. Those were general professional development opportunities. And then we offered some more you'd say disability themed professional development opportunities. So we had some presenters with disabilities talk about developing a resume and getting a job as a person with a disability, and talk about international disability rights. And in this workshop, as well as our other workshops, we really focused on bringing in trainers and speakers with disabilities. The goal was to put as many people with disabilities behind the microphone as possible. We have kind of a inventory of workshops and trainers who can run several of these project development and mentoring program and professional development opportunities, but we really wanted to bring in, if we didn't already have trainers and speakers with disabilities, to lead the sessions or partner with our trainers, so that we had that voice in our projects as well. So kind of in conclusion, we worked to employ the twin track approach by including people with disabilities in all of our projects, and then also creating some programming specific to our alumni with disabilities. We had an emphasis on including or having people with disabilities in leadership and planning positions, and doing that ourselves, as well as teaching our alumni to do that. We targeted and recruiting and inviting alumni with disabilities so that they would know that this was an opportunity that was open to them. And so that would be very clear. And then we worked to have trainers and speakers with disabilities behind the microphone. Yeah, so that's in summary what we've been doing the past year in the virtual space.
Wow. Thanks, Michelle. That sounds like a lot of great programming, not just focused on disability inclusion, but making sure that, as you say, they're in leadership positions as well. So that's great to hear. And before we go on to more of like a conversation with all panelists, I just wanted you to give like a brief description of what Flex and Yes is, and just for anyone who's not familiar with the program in our audience, and yeah, just a brief description.
Yeah, so Flex and Yes are US government scholarships that are offered to high school students from about 55 to 60 different countries in Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and the former Soviet Union and Central Europe, for these high school students to come to the United States and live with host families and go to high school for a year. The Flex and Yes programs both have websites. I think if you just Google Flex program or Flex exchange program and Yes exchange program, you'll find those websites with a list of countries and requirements, and the eligibility requirements for applying, and the applications will be opening this fall. So if you know anyone in those countries, especially youth with disabilities in those countries who might be interested in coming on an exchange program, we would be very happy if you would pass the word on to them.
Great, thanks, Michelle. And at this point, I wanted to invite all panelists to join me on camera so that we can start a conversation. And I want to start with Tim. So as I hope you've noticed, our panelists today come from a variety of backgrounds and in the work that they do. And so their expertise and experience comes from different aspects of the field. So they have different things to share. And Tim, I would really like for you to share, as someone from a disability organization, what were some of like the benefits of or opportunities that you saw people with disabilities gain over the last year with virtual spaces opening up in terms of employment, conferences, or other activities that people with disabilities were just able to engage in a lot more?
Thanks, Johanny. I'd be happy to. So there has certainly been a lot of change in the last 18 months, right? And so I want to talk about some of the benefits that we've seen. But first, I just wanted to give you a very quick background on our experience and perspective. So, I come from the National Council on Independent Living. So we're a national disability rights organization representing community-based disability rights organizations that are all run by and for people with disabilities. So we're operating mostly in the disability and civil rights space. So our perspective is going to be a little bit different than folks who are focused on exchange programs entirely. We've really enjoyed learning more about exchange programs through our work with Mayusa. But just know that we're approaching it from that aspect, and that most of our program participants, right, our conference attendees, our members, our training attendees are people with disabilities themselves, many of whom are working in the disability rights and social service space, also providing services to other people with disabilities in their communities. So that's kind of the context here. And as I thought about this question as we began to prepare for the webinar, first of all, it's very hard for me to disconnect the benefits from the challenges, because it has been because they just operate together, and oftentimes you're seeing the pros with the cons, and so I really had to think to separate these, but there have certainly been positives, and I've reflected a lot on the fact that we're a cross disability rights group, right? So we are getting and trying to follow through on access requests from people with all kinds of disabilities, and people with disabilities have been asking for these changes for years, right? In the education space, I'm not going to list them, because in all spaces, employment, exchange, education, et cetera, life in general, people with disabilities have been saying, usually in the form of a request for an accommodation. Why I need this, why can't I have it? And systems and structures and institutions have said, well, because we just can't do that. And we found in 2020 that actually they can. And so I think that global solution for me is the biggest benefit, is that we all had to come to terms with the fact that we could do this. It didn't mean it was easy. It certainly didn't mean it was perfect, as I'm sure we all experienced the triage solutions last spring by necessity, and have begun to build and perfect on those over more like the last year. So I think that has been really powerful. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I get to kind of where we go from here later in the conversation. In a lot of ways, the virtual environment has reduced access barriers for most people. And again, difficult to extract the negatives sometimes. So I'm going to save that for later. There are certainly new access challenges in the virtual space for sure. But for people who find it challenging to travel, for people who find it challenging to be in large group settings, for people who struggle to have accommodations filled, the virtual space has solved a lot of those problems. And I think that dovetails really heavily with some justice issues that we all need to be mindful of around who are able to access these opportunities and why, because they do dovetail heavily with issues around cost and community access. And so I think that's been a big benefit too. As I think about our own, experience and organization, memberships have remained pretty stable, pretty flat during this. I haven't seen much change in terms of our membership, our advocacy participation. What we have seen though is that our conference and training numbers have skyrocketed. And I think, that goes straight to that cost and justice issue, right? I mean, is it a disability issue? Sure, of course it is. And making sure that our spaces are accessible, yeah, that's very important. But when I see those numbers climb up, the first thing on my mind are that these are the people who have always wanted to come to our events and couldn't afford the plane ticket and the hotel, or were new at their organization and didn't make the list for who the organization was going to pay for a week of travel and all that, all those travel expenses. And so that is really, really exciting. to see. And I think that in the longer term sense, that is going to impact participation. For us, it'll impact membership, but for any organization, for any exchange program, it's going to increase reach. You're reaching more people, you're getting them involved, and that engagement is a big deal. In the employment space, and I am not, I don't have any particular expertise on employment. I think I've seen what a lot of you all have seen is that, again, new opportunities, things that people with disabilities have been asking for a long time. And I think it's very exciting to think about employers rethinking, the 9-to-5 office space, and whether it be fully virtual in some limited cases and hybrid in I think many more cases. That is a huge win for people with all types of disabilities. And so we're really, really excited to see that. As we talk about scholarships here, and for instance, the scholarships we offer are different from exchange scholarships, but one thing that I know runs through both of them is the cost aspect. We went to hand out our scholarships in 2020 and realized, my God, we can grant scholarships to 10 times the people that we could have before, because of the reduced costs of participating in a virtual event. Before, it was 80-90% of those expenses, if not more, were going to travel, to getting people there. And now that we have meaningful participation from someone's home, we were able to grant more scholarships and create new scholarships, for other marginalized folks because of the cost impact. And so again, sometimes it's hard for me to disconnect the access issues from these cost and justice issues as well, which is good, right? Because that kind of impact are the big benefits, the big takeaway from what is at its core of a horrible situation, but I'm hoping that we can make the best of this. I'm hoping that we can all promise to make these changes permanent, and whatever that looks like. I know we are all craving to be back in physical spaces again, for those of us that enjoy that. And but to the extent that we can consider hybrid approaches, to the extent that we can consider options that work for people, and I'll expand on that in a little bit. I hope that we can make that commitment, because I think that'll work really well, and make sure that this is just not a temporary thing that fades away. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think I appreciate all that you've shared. I think that you bring up some very good points, especially in trying to separate the challenges from the opportunities and the benefits. I heard a panelist in the symposium recently say that sometimes you learn a lot more from the challenges than you do from the benefits or opportunities, because it's a lot easier to see the gaps. But I'm looking forward to you expanding on just what are some of the challenges that you saw the community facing, and sort of like what are some of the strategies that you've all put into place to deal with them. I wanted to go on to give Caleb the opportunity to just I guess expand a little more on the idea that you shared with us during your presentation of that shift of mentality from meeting the student, from expecting students to go to you, to meeting the students where they are. And I know that you shared that you're new in the field, so I want to give you the space to sort of share with us what that perspective has brought into your work.
Great, yeah, thank you. Yeah, Fairly, I actually started in this role in February of 2020, so right as things were starting to kind of heat up a little bit. And I was, this was my first position within Education Abroad. I come from more of a student affairs background in higher education. And so it was an interesting shift. And I think, initially I was brought in and hired in this position because I would bring an outside perspective to it. And I think that, that was done before we knew what was going to kind of unfold throughout the year. But it's been helpful in that, as Tim mentioned, this is something that, we've had the capability to do. And especially in a higher ed setting, things move at a very slow pace, especially when it comes to change. And so this really put us in a position to be able to throw everything, all of our old ways of thinking out the window, and really pushed us to move quickly to adjust to something completely different. And I think through that process is when we learned, really starting to hear back from whether it's students or whether it's other, staff, maybe it's faculty or staff who are even housed at different campuses, and just really being able to hear back at, how having these virtual spaces was helpful and made that access easier for them. And so, being able to gather that feedback and I think even coming with my student affairs background is where we really kind of were able to say, these are the things that we need to make sure move forward. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have 65,000 students back on campus, and we have an administration who's saying we need to get back to normal and get back in person. But at the same time, we see the benefits in maintaining these spaces because of the ability to meet students where they are. So, like I mentioned, whether that's prohibited because of a disability, or like you're a single mother, or maybe you don't have transportation. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why students might not be able to come to you or find you, and why we need to make sure that we are accessible as possible. And so, yeah, hopefully that answered your question, expanded on that just a bit.
Yeah, I think so. And I definitely agree. There's definitely right now, at least, been a push of moving things forward and getting back to quote unquote normal. But it is important to, as you say, note the benefits and the advantages that students have seen from having the ability to access space virtually. And so there's really no reason to take that away if it's working. But it's nice to hear that that's something that will continue to be offered to students. Molly, I was really impressed with just the number of programs that you shared during your presentation. I think it seemed to me, at least, I don't know if this is just a perspective I took away, but AFS seemed to be just responding to what was going on the ground. So like just opening more and more opportunities as things became, I guess, more prominent, and it became more clear that these types of programs are needed. And so I wonder, in terms of your programs and accessibility, how do you see this allowing accessibility to grow moving forward? Just, I wouldn't say beyond the pandemic just yet, but moving forward.
Well, I would say both what Tim and Caleb shared really resonate with me. Tim, especially with like the social justice lens, like AFS is a really old organization, right? It's been around since World War I, started with ambulance drivers, it's American Field Service as the acronym, and morphed into international exchanges for 70 years. And what has really kind of been a shift for the organizational mindset is even virtual orientation was a big challenge for this organization to accept. with a strong preference for in-person learning, in-person connections, building friendships, in person across the world. Well, we started with moving our orientations online, and that sparked, we have all this knowledge, so many years experience and wisdom of doing international exchange programs. Let's house that curriculum in an online place where all of our 60 chapters around the world can access it. And then that fueled, well, why don't we start sharing this with other organizations, higher ed institutions? And I would say the pandemic, what really sparked AFS to move even more is, well, a virtual exchange can be really meaningful. We know now from research that if we want to actually impact intercultural competence and global competence for learners, it's not just about going and living with a host family or having 6 months in a country or, just even crossing a border. We know it has to be a meaningful experience. And we can create some of that online actually by having different perspectives represented, by having a really effective facilitator. So I think we are here to stay in terms of having virtual programs available. And again, with the Global Up at Home and that curriculum being available to anyone 18 years and older, the idea there that you may be beyond study abroad time in your life. You may have kids, you may just want this for your own professional development. So in creating just more flexible programs, I think we are going to be creating more access and hopefully for everyone. And along the way, really thinking like, okay, who is going to be in our sessions and what are those accommodations that are going to need to be addressed? But we've really been trying to think about that stuff from the start as we're developing our online curriculum.
Great, thank you. I think that, it's interesting that you mentioned sort of like the opportunity of Global Up programs just offering this to people who may not be in the study abroad space anymore, but want to see it in terms of like professional development, other aspects of their life. And it's really interesting, actually. One of our next sessions is talking about how exchange experiences are not just study abroad. So I encourage everyone to follow up with that as well and just learn more about that topic. But I want to sort of move on to Michelle now, and really just, I think that you've given us a bit of a mix in terms of just not the exchange part, but also the work that's you've all been doing to really put disability inclusion into it all. So in terms of what has the opportunities that have developed in the past year that you've shared with us, what are some of like the highlights that you see from perhaps alumni themselves, or highlights that you see in the work that you hope to continue to happen post this time?
Thank you, Johelini. So I think one of the biggest opportunities we've seen with this move to the virtual space has been the opportunity for connections among our alumni. Since previously, we didn't have the opportunity to bring alumni with disabilities together from different countries as easily. And so we've had the opportunity to hold spaces and workshops and seminars specific for the alumni with disabilities, and just to see the connections that have come when they start talking to each other, when they talk to some of the speakers and trainers that they've brought in, has really been impactful and valuable. And I can see that it's continuing on in its impact in the alumni's lives. For example, we had one of our mentoring pairs in the mentoring program this summer were two students from Africa, one from Mali and one from Nigeria. And as they were talking, they started talking about their goals for university and future exchange opportunities and other projects. And the mentor realized that the mentee hadn't had the opportunity to graduate high school, although he had kind of passed that age several years ago. This alumnus was deaf, and it just wasn't possible in his country, in his community, to graduate high school. And so the mentor invited him to come to his country, where they had a program for deaf individuals to complete a high school diploma, so he could have access to some of these other opportunities that were closed to unless you had a high school diploma. We also brought in speakers, and it was we saw the alumni really enjoy connecting with the speakers. We had an individual from Pakistan who is a wheelchair user, who's created his own mentoring program in Pakistan, and he's a strong leader in the disability community and in Pakistan in general. And he enjoyed speaking with our alumni, and especially enjoyed speaking with the alumni from Pakistan. They hadn't had the opportunity to meet each other before that. And so they exchanged contact information and continued on a lively conversation that began in these workshops. And then some of just the basic connections of passing on information about opportunities, grant opportunities, things that are presented by the US embassies in their countries. These are available to all the alumni, but I think sometimes if you don't specifically tell an alumnus or an alumna about this opportunity, how are they going to know? And so when we had gathered these alumni with disabilities in a group, we made sure that we communicated these opportunities to them as well, so that they would know that this was available specifically to them. So I think those connections that we were able to make were one of the neat opportunities that we saw from this pivot to virtual space this year.
Wow, that's really great. I think that it's very interesting that you sort of shared the connection that students were able to make with other students or alumni who were in other countries. I think that I've heard a lot about just in participating in exchange. We often talk about connecting to local disability communities and organizations to learn more about the culture of where you're at, right? Or the disability culture specifically. So I find it very interesting that there's been this connection, not just from their experience in the US when they participated in their exchange program, but to also be able to connect with other people from their cohort and further exchange in other countries. So thank you just for sharing those examples. I think they're really cool. Tim, I sort of want to go back to you and allow you to talk about some of those challenges that you were hinting at earlier, and what that looks like, and perhaps a bit about what the strategies are that you put into place to deal with them.
Sure. So we, like I said, there are certainly new challenges in the virtual space. And really what I'm going to talk about here is assuming that those obvious boxes have been checked, right? That, I know, and I really appreciate everybody's made great strides in terms of providing access in the virtual space. So, once your captioner is set up, and once your interpreters are all confirmed, what else is there that we need to be mindful of? And the first is this is another crossover issue for me, but we're all tired of Zoom. The Zoom fatigue is a very real thing, and it is also a disability. It's also a disability issue. But this is a lot. It is tiring to be on camera, and we are all on camera all day long. And so, any kind of special programming, any kind of event, you can't extract that from the fact that we've all still been doing school or our 9-to-5s or catching up with family, all in the exact same format. And hopefully we will continue to maybe settle into that aspect of the new normal. But I think that is really real, and that plays into a lot of the logistics that we see around these events in terms of spacing and breaks, which are also disability access issues. So I think just being mindful of the way that, you know, sensory overload is very real, and we need to be mindful of building in breaks. That is not just a luxury for us as you know, as speakers or planners, but really a necessary component for, you know, participants with autism, sensory processing disorder, ADHD, and ADD. You know, I mean, those are very, very real issues and so simple to solve. Building in a 5-minute break during a long program, being mindful of session length, and everyone appreciates them. So it's a bit of universal design in the virtual space as well. I think one of the other big access issues that I want to talk about is just cognitive access. We, you know, especially last year in 2020, as we navigated creating our first virtual conference, you know, we got a lot of pushback from folks who said, I can't participate in Zoom. And one of the things that folks asked for, you know, was kind of a checklist or a step-by-step process for getting into a Zoom sheet or into a Zoom meeting. When you write that out, when you truly write out step by step what it takes to get into a Zoom meeting, and I don't mean just clicking the button, I mean finding getting onto a website, logging on, you know, finding the connection information, getting connected, entering a meeting idea. It's a whole page. It's a whole, and that can be very intimidating to some people. And I'm going to go into I'm going to go into solutions later, but just being mindful of the fact that some of the things that are very easy for some of us, clicking a link on a smartphone, can actually be a barrier for others. And I'll touch on that when I talk about solutions in a moment. Do you want me to go into that now, or do you want me to? I think we have another question.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think you've brought up some good points, and it's really interesting to think about, because as you mentioned when you were sharing, this is not something that is only impacting people with disabilities, but a lot of people. I mean, Zoom fatigue is real, and I mean, after having a long day of work and video conferencing, like, I'm not really interested in going on into another Zoom meeting, even if it's just to catch up with a friend. Like, I just need a break from all of it. So I think it is very important that you've sort of brought the issue to the forefront, not just as a disability issue, but as an issue that we're all being impacted by right now. And so when talking about those perhaps solutions, it's really like, how are we improving engagement for everyone, not just people with disabilities, right? And I wanted to give Molly, Caleb, and Michelle an opportunity to also talk about some of the challenges that you've all seen in your programs, and anyone who wants to start with that one.
I would echo some of the challenges that Tim shared, just in terms of, especially with our Global U Adventure program, where it's an additional exchange that students can participate in. Knowing that they already are likely doing school online, we thought maybe that would be a hard sell, another online. And so just how we address that is in our live sessions, because they can do the modules individually, right? And go through those in a self-paced manner. But just in the live sessions, really having it be a discussion so that it is engagement. We're not just talking at them. That's one of the ways. But I think another challenge in just creating access, we know Wi-Fi and internet is not created equal across the world. So just remembering that. And when we are asking people from around the world to connect at certain times, time zones, languages, having 53 different countries participate in virtual exchange can be just whose language is represented, you know, so it just brings up social justice issues that every step you try to create something new and want to create a more accessible program, you have to be very considerate of all those aspects.
Yeah, definitely. I think those issues of time zone and internet access is very real. We need to be mindful that not everybody has high-speed internet to connect. And so offering on-demand material is often beneficial to those who still want to participate. So I think that's definitely a challenge and something that can be worked with. Michelle or Caleb, if you want to share some of the challenges you all faced providing disability accommodations or just accessibility in general to your programs.
Yeah, so I would say for us, kind of going along with what both Tim and Molly talked about, also is kind of within virtual spaces, especially those like, events like this one, is not really kind of going into the session or the presentation and not really knowing who's going to show up, who's there, who's on the other end of the camera. I can't see that, and so I don't know how to adjust or pivot my actions and what I'm doing because I don't really know who my audience is. And so I think that's one of the biggest, kind of from my end, from the programming aspect, has been one of the biggest challenges that I've seen with the virtual aspect.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I can piggyback on what the other speakers have said about access. I really appreciate what Tim said about the challenges and even getting logged into a Zoom meeting. We've had some students who wanted to attend a Zoom meeting, but struggled to figure out how to get logged in, which link to click on. And I think a lot of it was figuring out the right mindset for some of the organizers. In all of our busy schedules, sometimes I think we put together a program and offer it to a group of individuals. For us, it was alumni, and then we kind of put the burden on them to figure out how to take advantage of this opportunity. And if you have a presentation and the individual you expected doesn't come on or reach out with problems that were they had in getting access to a Zoom meeting, then that can be kind of frustrating. So we had to really kind of pause and think about why are there issues getting access to this Zoom meeting or other opportunities, and kind of bring it down to an individual case-by-case basis and just start communicating with each individual and figure out what do they need to have access to this meeting. Similar for some of the small grant opportunities. So whenever you have a grant opportunity, you create a project, you design a budget, and then you have to report on how you spent the money after the project is completed, which is an incredible list of to-dos and details and numbers, which is not as easy for really anyone, I think, as we assume it might need to be. And so communication and figuring out how to present the instructions for designing these projects and doing the reporting on the grants was something we had to work on, especially with one deaf alumnus. We had our regular workshops and seminars on how to create a budget and how to report on the budget and the money that was spent. And then for this alumnus, we had a separate session. The initial session was interpreted into sign language for the deaf alumnus. And then we had a follow-on session just specifically with him to figure out how this applied to his project, because for him, he needed that additional step of physical application to the project that he was working on. So that ended up working really well in terms of providing access to information that was necessary to take advantage of these opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that example. I want to invite the audience to start sending in their questions for the panelists. If you have a specific question while they sort of get at the second this other question. So Tim, I just wanted to go back to you and sort of talk about some of those strategies of what you've done to allow people to access your programs, and then hopefully we'll get some questions.
Great, thanks. So, I always start this conversation with the dollars, because so often, right, what accommodations run up against is an explanation, well, that we would love to do that for you, but we just can't afford it. So for those of us on the planners and management side, I just ask that we be mindful of that at budget time. And even if you don't know the details, either put it in, or if you need to fight and educate others to push to put it in, make sure that you have line items for accommodations and disability access. And I know many of you do. And looking beyond, the obvious ones like sign language and cart captioning at virtual events. I already talked about taking breaks. Some of these are really simple. The other thing that we do is a lot of visual description, so providing a lot of audio description. If we show a video, making sure that it's not just caption, but also includes audio description for folks who are blind or otherwise can't see visual content. You notice at the beginning of the session, I began with a visual description of myself. That's something that we've just made kind of part and parcel of everything we do. And we do that and ask our presenters to do that, when there's any kind of image or on slide content, just like we do for our physical beings. We've moved away from the chat feature in Zoom and other platforms. We found that especially when there's a running chat, it's very, very difficult to make that accessible. We naively and incorrectly thought in 2020 that we could voice a lot of that content for folks. It's just not manageable. And so now most of the events that we're running are 200 to 1,200 people. So that can be a different animal. In small groups, it might be great. It might actually benefit access as long as someone is moderating that and intentionally voicing that content so that everyone can access it. And then just the power of duplicity and multiple options. I was thinking when, I think it was Molly, when you were talking about, internet access, which is a very real issue, and global access, we always offer phone connections, and that gets back to the universal design, and the visual content that I was talking about. I might be visually describing someone who's calling in because they don't have broadband access. So I mean, even I still default the same visual description for someone who's blind. Well, that might not be true. It might be someone who doesn't have access to Wi-Fi or solid internet. So always providing phone options for folks to call in, always providing international numbers, and thinking about how your accommodations can be provided also to someone who's over the telephone. We always stream our captions not only within Zoom, but on a separate URL as well. So really there's a lot of duplicity in what we do because different solutions work for different people for different reasons. The other thing too, the last point I wanted to make just in terms of knowing who is on the other end of the line and providing best accommodations is to always ask. And so making sure that any kind of registration or onboarding is asking about accommodations and what people need to participate meaningfully. Because again, some of these common accommodations are relatively easy to set up. But you want to be mindful of the folks who are, most marginalized and need the most support. I wanted to just put a pin also in technical support. Good intentional technical support is also an access issue. One of the things we did at our annual conferences is that we set up technical support so that if you had a problem logging into a meeting, it did not matter whether your issue was your comfort with technology or if it was disability related, you were going to be able to access someone who could give you one-on-one support, including remote support to help you connect to a session. And so just being mindful that, if you have IT support in your organization or university, or if you need to contract with someone, that was something we were able to do pretty easily, actually. And can be a really powerful solution and give your staff and attendees some peace of mind that if they run into a problem, you're going to have someone with in-depth expertise that can offer a hand. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Those are some great strategies to sort of offer as tips, because it's something that can be implemented in all virtual programs. I think especially your comment on the chat function and just having that open to folks is definitely great for engagement. But when you're trying to engage people in 2 different ways, it can be conflicting for access reasons. So I know that that's definitely something that we've learned as well at MIUSA as a team, just getting feedback from our participants and those attending. I want to pass it on to Monica now to sort of give us a bit of the Q&A that has been coming in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Terry Lenny. We have a question in the chat box, probably for you, Tim. It says, so for a running chat, do you leave it out unless in a small group? Or are there other accommodations you make for that?
Yeah, so in a small group setting, which I would define as mostly anything we're running in Zoom meeting, which is typically for us, 25 people or less, we will assign someone to voice the chat comments. In anything that we're running in the webinar format, which is going to be 25 and above, any kind of formal event, any conference workshop, we have begun to implement the policy of just turning it off. Now, we still leave it on so that folks can communicate with the panelists if they have a technical issue. But that back and forth, hello, everyone, or one of the worst things is someone sharing a great resource that's absolutely fantastic that a portion of your audience can't access. And so sometimes it's great content, but it's, there's an inequity there that we found it's easier to just leave it off. So yeah, that's what we do.
Great, Tim. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, and the question came in, I wonder if creating a Google Doc or something that people can access during the platform, they don't have to engage in it, like everybody put where you're calling it from or do any of that, but it could still be a stream where people can share resources, and then it's captured. So then you can also share after the event is complete. So another question, let's see, a query regarding shifting to virtual setting as a firsthand experience. What are some sort of, I don't think I understood that question. Let's go back to that Q&A one. So mostly Q&A or only to host panelists unless in a small group, and then an assigned reader. And that's what we do. So in this webinar platform, you can see that we've only opened chat to the host and the panelists. So primarily if there's any tech issues, then you can connect with our host or our staff who are checking those for any issues. And then if we do have engaging questions that we want you to share, then you can post that in there and then we would share it rather than the participants getting the full chatter that would be coming through.
Yeah, some of the same strategies that we try to implement. While I hope we get at least one more question, I wanted to give the panelists the opportunity to sort of give us like a quick snippet of what you hope continues moving forward. And Monica, feel free to interrupt if another question comes in. And yeah, it's open to everyone. So anyone who wants to go first, moving forward, what do you hope stays, continues, improves, or just, yeah, in general?
This is Tim. I certainly don't have anything brilliant to say, but I will kind of reiterate what I said in my first statement about just making a commitment to making some of these changes permanent. And as we all crave, well, as many of us crave, the physical contact and social connection, which has been a huge casualty in this. I acknowledge that. that we be mindful of how hybrid options can help us achieve the best of both worlds. Even if that means running simultaneous programs or means inventing something that looks completely different from what we're doing now. Let's make that commitment to figure that out and continue to offer the positives that have come from virtual engagement.
And I would piggyback off that as well. Coming from the higher education setting, you know, we have an opportunity to look at this as a restart, as a refresh. You know, we have almost two classes of students coming in to college who they don't know what a traditional college experience even looks like, and so there is no excuse for us not to take that opportunity then to kind of start to rethink and reinvent the way we do things, because that will be their normal. Going back to normal doesn't mean anything to those group of students because they haven't experienced that yet. So it is a great time to take the opportunity to do that, and really, you know, that's what we're doing. We've basically thrown everything out and just kind of started over. And so you know, I think moving forward, that's definitely something we're always going to take into consideration, you know, from this point forward. Does this have to be something that's face-to-face or in person? Does it have to be in this particular location? Is this something that needs to be a live session virtually? Can it be on demand and available at any time? So those are all things now that just we automatically are thinking through.
I think for us, since we in the virtual space have been able to do some of the second track of holding programming for our alumni with disabilities, the hope and goal would be to continue those programs. So continuing the mentoring program for alumni with disabilities and the re-entry workshops for the newly returned alumni with disabilities, but also to stay connected with those alumni so that we are following them as they become leaders in their communities, so that we can tap them later as leaders in their communities and their countries, and just in the alumni community in general, bringing them back as speakers and trainers, and not just in the disability space, but in the alumni community for all of our alumni. So I think that would be one of the goals that we have, is to kind of bring it back to the first track where we have everyone included in the projects and workshops and opportunities that we have for alumni.
I share a lot of those same hopes. I think my just general hope is that we've really challenged the status quo about what needs to take place in person and why, and that we don't go back. And I especially am thinking, you know, as a professional in international education, who I typically do go to a lot of conferences every year, and I'm really excited about how we can make conferences, like how we can increase like access to the professional development opportunities in this field, where whether it be an economic challenge or a disability challenge, just making those spaces more accessible for us as professionals, as we're creating, you know, new programs that can be more accessible for students with disabilities or economic, you know, challenges as well, to access intercultural competence.
Thank you. I think those are great things to keep in mind. And I just wanted to point out that Monica has shared some resources with everyone about just virtual exchanges and some of the resources that NCDE has to make presentations more accessible. Just example of how we try to make our programs and virtual offerings more accessible to everyone. But Monica, did you want to share anything else as well?
Yeah, if I have a few minutes. First, thank you everybody for this really insightful discussion, kind of looking at this past year. I'm kind of thinking, Tim, about what you were saying about scholarship opportunities, and same with the clearinghouse. Once we're in this situation and we're looking to the next year, unfortunately realizing that we would still be in it for some time, we were able to shift like our finances and look at new opportunities. So this is also a time, as you've mentioned, of new opportunities. And so we created an externship where we were able to provide a stipend to alumni with disabilities to create a virtual exchange promotion project to promote access to international exchange for more people with disabilities. And of course, we're not traveling as well. And so this kind of opened up new opportunities for us. And now we're going to sustain it. So like, oh, wow, that got a lot of attention. We were able to invite 5 people from the US who are alumni. And now we were able to do it to 10 from the US and overseas. And so we're just continuing to learn and then like realize this space. And even this virtual exchange symposium, our in-person was about 120, and now we've got close to 1,000. And so those are really exciting opportunities that I would love to continue. And so I'm thinking for the exchange side, or from A&M universities, what does that look like for you all, or if you've been in any discussions of how you can shift that funding to maybe, like Tim was saying, create scholarship opportunities? We're not going to stay in the space. And when we're talking about virtual exchange, it's not about like only staying in virtual exchange, it's an option. And then we're going to eventually go back to in-person. So as we bridge those two, do you see opportunities in your funding structure to be able to budget more for reasonable accommodations as we get into in-person events or creating scholarships for underrepresented students? This might just be my hope, and like just planting it is to, maybe it's not done, but just take that in, and anybody else that's on joining the webinar is to plant that seed.
Yeah, just Joy Lenny, thank you. Thank you, Monica. I think that is definitely a good note to end on in terms of moving forward, and just thinking about how you can improve access to opportunities, not just through information and making your information accessible, but thinking about how do you offer funds so that these opportunities seem like they are an opportunity for those who may not have the funds at the time. I hope that you've all enjoyed this conversation. I certainly have, and I've learned a lot from our panelists and the different ways they've shared what they do and what they've learned. And we hope to highlight some of these tips later on, but thank you all for joining us. And this is, I guess, goodbye until the next session.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.